Did the S1ii just kill the GH7 and by extension Micro Four Thirds? I'm not so sure, but I get why people are saying that. The S1ii basically does everything that the GH7 does, but in a full frame body. That's really awesome. I'm glad Lumix released the camera, and it doesn't make me love my GH7 any less personally, but I can see why some people might be thinking, this is the moment I switch over, and it does obviously have some advantages over the GH7. That being said, there are a few things that the GH7 does still do better in my opinion, and we're gonna get into those now. And yeah, it's gonna be a little hard to compare an older camera with a smaller sensor that's is like over $1,000 cheaper, but we're gonna do it anyway. So here's a few things I think the GH7 still does better. So I think mostly the dynamic range boost implementation is a lot simpler. So obviously the GH6, it was very confusing to a lot of people on how exactly you would want to use that to get the most out of it. But on the GH7, it's just 500. It's on all the time, up to 60 frames per second. There is no boost to turn on and off because the rolling shutter is good all of the time for the most part. Even if you want to use the lower 250, like, oh no, I can't turn it off and I want to, you can just turn on extended ISO range and get a similar result. And another thing is the dynamic range boosts of these newer cameras only work up to 30 frames a second. So only normal frame rates, no slow motion at all. And because the GH7 and GH6 read out natively at 120 frames instead of, I'm assuming 60 frames, then they're able to use their dynamic range boost up to 60 frames per second. I use 60 frames a second all the time, so I would hate to have my dynamic range boost and my rolling shutter performance honestly affected by having to figure out if I want to turn dynamic range boost on or off. So it's just on all the time, up to 60 frames a second on the GH7, as opposed to 30 frames a second on the other cameras. I just hate having to choose, right? Dynamic range or rolling shutter or fast frame rates, or, you know, all this stuff being interchangeable and getting better or worse in whatever mode you're in. It's just not for me. And just in general, the sensor readout speed, it seems to be better in some modes than the GH7, or about the same, and then worse in other modes. So again, that's just a thing where I think the GH7 performs a little bit more consistently with the 1080p, the 4K, and the 6K, or like 5.8, 5.9K being, you know, pretty similar in terms of our readout speeds. Another issue is going to just be the heat I'm worried about. Like, I know the S1ii is infinitely better than the S1R2 when it comes to overheating, but with a sensor that is 4 times as big and that little fan in the, you know, EVF, I just feel like the full-blown back fan is better placed and bigger on the GH7. And, you know, I really just have no issues ever with the GH6 and GH7. They are some of the most rugged, tough, overheat-proof cameras I've ever used. And maybe I'll do a test on that someday, but I just feel like I can't quite yet trust the S1ii as much as the GH7. But again, once more testing comes out, I might change my opinion. Another thing is just going to be crop factors, you know, like obviously the S1ii can do 4K 60, 4K 120, all this, and the crops are minor, but there is no crops on the GH7. So yeah, it's one of those things where they're all very manageable on the S1ii. I'm very much nitpicking, but it's one of those things where, hey, the GH7 doesn't have any crops and they have all the same frame rates up to 4K 120. But the one thing the GH7 is missing compared to the S1ii, I'll talk about at the end of the video. And as much as the open gate features on the S1ii, which I kind of just hinted at if we're gonna be honest, are amazing, the GH7 and the 4x3 sensor is still better for social media cropping, because a 4x3 image is, you know, significantly taller than a 3x2 image. So if I'm ever shooting social media content, stuff that needs vertical cuts, anything like that, 4x3 is still always better, and it's going to give you less frame cutoff when you're reframing for vertical. So just a slight preference there, but again, somewhat pretty minor, some may say. And then I think the last one is just like, you can still use your Micro Four Thirds lenses if you've got a bunch. So if you're wanting to make the jump and make the switch and all that sort of stuff, this is the moment to pick full frame, I would say, if you're on Micro Four Thirds still, I suppose. But just keep in mind, you're gonna have to get all new lenses, and some of these lenses don't have equivalents, you know? I don't think there's many lenses as beautiful as the Leica 42.5, or as small and convenient as the Leica 9mm, or as just so generally versatile as the Leica 10-25, one of my favorite lenses that I've reviewed about 6 times on this channel, and I'm probably gonna review again soon. These lenses are just so diverse, big, small, pro, super cheap, and there's a ton of used ones as well. So like with Micro Four Thirds, you just have so many options. L mount, you have a lot too, but Micro Four Thirds have been around and been relevant for a lot longer. In fact, I talked about all that stuff with Nigel Barros on his podcast about the future of Micro Four Thirds, the future of L mount, and more up here, all kind of revolving around our experience at NAB, where there was so much more development with L mount than Micro Four Thirds in that space. But yeah, the L mount lenses are really great, honestly. Like, they perform super well. We all know that. They're very consistent compared to Micro Four Thirds lenses, which are a little bit more on the hit and miss side when it comes to performance, just because they are made at different eras. And yeah, just like that, there are plenty of advantages that the S1ii have over the GH7. So, you know, the lenses, if you prefer the lenses, if you prefer the full frame look, which I guess is tied to the lenses, but also a separate thing, the full frame look, the full frame lenses, obviously you're going to get the most out of that sort of thing and the most of that look when using full frame lenses on a full frame camera. That's the end of story, whether they're the vintage lenses like the Helios, or adapted EF lenses, or PL lenses, or L mount lenses. You're gonna get the most of those lenses and the best full frame look using a full frame camera. And the full frame camera comes with other advantages too. As unintuitive as the new dynamic range boosts and things like that of the S1ii are, there are more options where you can actually choose between a dual gain sensor and a dual gain output sensor. So you can have great low light performance, or you can have great dynamic range boost performance. You can have great dynamic range, but somewhat lacking rolling shutter. And so I think the option to choose those things is valuable. So I'm not going to discount that at all, but it is just one of those things where it's up to you, you know. Do you want this more complex full frame camera that can get you better results and push the limits of dynamic range and all this stuff? Or do you want a cheaper camera that just works with the dynamic range boost always on? And the GH7 is no slouch either. Like, it performs really well. It is pushing as hard as it can to compete with APS-C and Super 35 sensors, which is insane because they are physically larger, and yet stuff like the FX30 performs worse compared to, you know, the GH7, at least according to Geeky Nerdy Techie. Check his video out here. I loved this comparison. I thought it was great. And of course, there's a few other things too, like there's all the new fancy screen, which is just a little bit better than the GH7 potentially. And there's all these algorithms and new menu settings and little details and things like that that are being introduced in the new camera and implemented a little bit better and a little bit faster, everything along those lines. But the biggest single feature, if I'm going to be real, is, both, I guess there's kind of two. Full frame, minimum 60 frames a second is what I've been wanting for years, and it's here, right? It's a great look to put like an 85mm on a full frame camera and get like slow motion shots. Just looks great. But the big one is open gate 60 frames a second, which, as far as I know, this is like one of the only cameras in the world that can do full frame or even just full sensor open gate at a frame rate higher than 30 frames a second. And that is so useful for like product videos, even weddings and things like that, where I'm gonna want to crop or I want extra flexibility. It's just a no-brainer, and it's such a huge feature, and I've been asking for it on the GH7 forever. We had it back in the GH5 days and we never appreciated it. It was only 8-bit, I'll give you that. So I don't know. I just really hope they can figure out a way to update the GH7, honestly, because yeah, then I could push off getting the S1ii a little longer if the GH7 could do this. But if it can't, if it's not possible, I might just have to let it go. But come on, Panasonic, at least MP4 light mode. Okay, between you and me, cancel the tiny camera. Just put 4K 60 open gate in the GH7. Please. Please. Okay. Anyway, so at the end of the day, is Micro Four Thirds dead? Is the GH7 dead? Am I selling it? Am I getting the S1 too? I don't know, but I wanted to lay it out here of just all the little things I thought the GH7 did just a little bit better than the than the S. So I just wanted to lay out all that stuff. So I just wanted to lay that all out there and put my opinion out there of just like, okay, if I really think about it, what am I getting from the S1 II? What's the value proposition? You know, the full frame look, slightly better dynamic range. Because when it comes to the frame rates and the resolutions and all that sort of thing, it really is not that different than the GH7. So if you can use a little bit more light, care about noise a little bit less, and not get insane amounts of background, like 1.8 on a full frame or 1.2 on a full frame, then Micro Four Thirds and the GH7 is still a great way to go. So if you don't have a GH7, maybe consider that instead of the S1 II. And if you already have a GH6 or a GH7, just know that you have quite a bit of what this new camera offers for a much lower price, and honestly with less compromises and things you have to worry about, like rolling shutter and decreased or increased dynamic range performance depending on whatever mode you're in. I think it just works a little bit smoother, a little bit faster, and I would even honestly say that it seems like the 4K 120 is sharper on the GH7, but you know, maybe someone can test that for me who actually has the camera. But anyway, that's about all. That's about it, guys. Those are my thoughts. This kind of harkens back to my old videos. I felt like, you know, one of my very first videos was 7 things the GH4 does better than the GH5. And it's just finding out these little tiny details that these cameras that are objectively a little bit worse and a little bit older have over their newer counterparts. And it's not really to say that those cameras are better. It's really just to keep in mind, you can still get great results with a S5 II or a GH7 or, you know, a GH5 or a GH4. You know, they're still great cameras. You're still going to get great results. And just keep that in mind before you rush out to buy the latest and greatest thing, unless you absolutely need it, unless it has one specific feature that's going to make your life easier. This isn't a magical device. It's a pretty insane upgrade. It's great value. It looks awesome. Probably going to buy one, but I don't need it. Really, you don't probably need it. And once you are making money in your bag and it's the right time, then is the moment to go for it, in my opinion. At least that's how I think about it. So anyway, comment down below. What do you think? Did this kill the GH7? Did it kill the S5 II for you guys? Or are you like me where you're happy with one or both of those cameras to supplement what that one camera can do in the S1 II? And let me know if you prefer the S1ii II. Maybe you do. I think it would be great to have for stills. I just don't do stills enough. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Thanks for stopping by. All that sort of stuff. You know, I would love for you guys to subscribe. Well, not a lot of people are getting, you know, recommendations from the subscriber tab. It does push me up in your algorithm. It reminds you when I upload videos, and it helps just my channel look better with more subscribers. So I do appreciate it so much when anybody subscribes. Like every subscriber I get, I'm just like, I look at it too much, to be honest. And so, you know, if you're subscribed or just subscribed right now, I'll see you when I see you. Thanks for watching.